Time is 5 minutes past 9:30, and I'm going to reconvene the Citizens Redistricting Commission. We took a recess last Friday at around 5 o'clock, so this is a continuation of the same meeting. May we have a roll call at this point in time?
Commissioner Aguirre?
Here.
Commissioner Baraba?
Here.
Commissioner Blanco? Here. Commissioner Dye?
Here.
Commissioner DeGiulio?
Here.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber? Commissioner Forbes?
Here.
Commissioner Galambos-Malloy?
Here.
Commissioner Ontai? Commissioner Parvenu?
Present.
Commissioner Rai?
Here.
Commissioner Ward?
Here.
Commissioner Yao?
Here. All right, I do believe we have a quorum, so we will, the first order of business is the swearing in of our newest commissioner, so can we? Okay. Mr. Claypool, you're going to make the introduction?
Thank you. My name is Dan Claypool. I'm also the newly elected, or not elected, I'm the newly appointed Executive Director. I would have the great pleasure of being able to introduce Ms. Maria Blanco. She is from Los Angeles. She holds a law degree from UC Berkeley School of Law and a BA from UC Berkeley. Commissioner Blanco is the Vice President of the Civic Engagement for the California Community Foundation. She is the CCF LA's purpose is to help strengthen communities and build a brighter future for Los Angeles County. Previously, Commissioner Blanco was the Executive Director of the Earl Warren Institute at Berkeley School of Law, and she is registered with the Democratic Party. I'd like everyone to give her a round of applause. We will now have Ms. Mejia from the Secretary of State's office, and she will swear in Maria Blanco.
Good morning. Good morning. Raise your right hand and repeat after me, stating your name after I say aye. I
Maria Blanco,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of California,
and the Constitution of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
the duties about which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now I turn it back to the commission.
Ms. Blanco, would you like to say a few words first?
I'm extremely pleased to serve on this commission. I consider it a great honor. This is something that the citizens of California have been looking forward to for a very long time, and I hope that I meet their expectations and do not disappoint them. And I look forward to working closely with my fellow commissioners.
Thank you. 2 or 3 things I like to do before we get going with the agenda item. Number one is I'd like to ask Commissioner Forbes to kind of summarize what we had done in the 3 days that we spent last week, and then after that I'd like to invite our executive director to say a few words, and then following that we'll discuss the agenda in a little more detail, and then we'll proceed with the with the order of the business. Commissioner Forbes?
Thank you, Commissioner Yao. The full commission met last week for 3 days. 5 of the newly selected members were sworn in. Ms. Blanco was not in attendance as she was out of the country. Commissioner Galambos Malloy joined by phone from Colombia the first day, but was out of contact for days 2 and 3. In addition, the commission hired an executive director, Daniel Claypool. Mr. Claypool, who worked for the Office of State Audits, was one of the individuals who had been responsible for establishing the procedure for recruiting and selecting the pool from which the commissioners were ultimately chosen. We also set the per diem rate standard at a minimum of 6 hours of commission work to equal 1 day, and tentatively set our February meetings to take place in Claremont and Sella, California. This was done in part as part of our outreach effort that will ultimately reach the entire state. We also established a subcommittee structure. The 5 subcommittees that were established were the Management Finance Subcommittee, Technical, Legal, Outreach, and Public Information Subcommittees. Finally, we reluctantly accepted the resignation from the Commission of Eleanor Kuo and directed staff to notice for future meetings our selection of a replacement. Since Ms. Kuo represented the Democratic Party, per Prop 11, the remaining members will select a replacement from the 7 Democratic applicants remaining in the original final pool of 36. And we are meeting in Sacramento on January 20th and 21st, and January 26th, 27th, and 28th.
Thank you. Mr. Claypool? You're welcome to come to the podium. You're welcome to speak from the chair.
I was afraid that no one would be able to see me over there. I'm kind of blocked in. First of all, as I had said earlier to the commissioners, I thank you again for this opportunity. I have finally closed out my obligations with the Bureau of State Audits, and we are moving ahead with a lot of the plans that I've been thinking about since I found out that I was going to be working for you. Specifically, tomorrow I would like to be able to present to all of you a plan for, our preliminary plan for what I think we need for staffing, and start moving us towards picking up the different individuals that we're going to need to make this work. I'm looking at the different applications this evening for the administrative position. The Secretary of State's office is working to get me the different applications for the communications officers. When I get those, what I would like to be able to do is to go through them and then speak with you about the different individuals that are applying. We have space now over at 12th and K, and we will be sharing that space with the Commission for Economic Development. The Secretary of State's office has done a wonderful job of putting together space for all of you when you come into town. If you need a place to stay, we will get you cards so that you can access that building and the protocol for getting in. It has office space for our chief counsel as well, and myself and one other individual, and a large meeting room for us. We also have other meeting facilities that we can use. And finally, we will be looking at the salary structures tomorrow. I believe that will be presented along with some contracts that the Secretary of State is proposing for us to make our operations move more smoothly. So that's what I've done so far. Does anyone have any questions?
Sure, we'll have lots of questions for you as the day goes on. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
introductory remarks. All right. Actually, before I get on the discussion of the agenda, let me open up the floor microphone to anybody in the audience that would like to address this commission on items that's both on the agenda and off the agenda. If any individual interested in addressing the commission, please step up to the microphone. All right, seeing no one approaching the microphone, I'll bring the discussion back to the commission. We have, from the last meeting, agenda item number 1 through number 10. And those are the agendas that we have discussed at various stages of the matter. So we'll continue doing a lot of that. And item number 11 and 12, 11, 12, and 13 were added as of after the last meeting, if I'm if I'm correct. It may have been added before the closure of the meeting. So in any case, I believe that the first time we can address those items is 10 or 14 days from the time that we put the item on the agenda. So in which case, you'll put it at a minimum next week. Is that the latest reading on that?
That's correct. We noticed the revised agenda the same day of your last meeting. Got it out that night. So 14 days from then.
All right. So
which I believe is I don't have the calendar right in front.
Right.
I believe that's the 28th.
Right. So so on Friday next week is when we can start addressing item 10, 11, and 12. With regard to item number 1 through 10, Commissioner Dye and myself had a phone conversation, and let me kind of summarize for you as to some of the points that we think we want to bring before the entire commission for discussion. You may want to jot down these items as I speak. Under item number 3 on the commission governance, we're going to talk about the process of selecting the replacement commissioners. We cannot talk about candidates, but the process of selecting a replacement, I think, is something that's well within the commission governance, and we will initiate that discussion. We're going to get deeper into the subcommittee discussions, including finalizing the membership, identifying meeting dates. I think we share with everybody the charter of each of the commissions or subcommittees. Last time, maybe we need to finalize that or discuss it a little further. And I'm also hoping that we can identify some of the high priority tasks for each of the subcommittees with perhaps some assigned due dates for these tasks. Obviously, we need to identify the meeting place in addition to the meeting date. And perhaps a discussion of whether we want to video stream the meeting or provide audio only or provide a delayed posting of the video of such meetings onto the internet. So these are items that are to be discussed from this point on. Another item that would be included as item number 3 is a continued discussion of the rotating chairperson. I think we had a show of hands who was interested, and I think Ann Osborne may have asked you to submit your name to her because the video wasn't available for staff to review in time for this meeting. And if we do want to rotate it, who's going to be next? I, in particular, am interested in having a different chairperson if we do meet in the city of Claremont. I think it would be appropriate to do so as compared for me to chair the meeting in my hometown. So, all right. Item number 8 is the discussion of is a broad topic on discussing any redistricting matters. And I think that would be a good item to initiate the discussion on the outreach framework, not just the process flow, but the philosophies, concepts, ideas. I believe this item we're going to spend a big block of time over the next couple of days. Item number 9 is the schedule, operation, location of future meetings. I will brief you on my finding of the possibility of meeting in Claremont. And also there are issues that we identify along the way, including video. It's the issue of security, physical security for us all being in one place, the cost, and also maybe go into discussing as to whether we want to broaden our outreach by having multiple locations within the same month, okay, as compared to having one location a month. So far, we set the meeting agenda covering 1 month at a time, and if we do want to try to go to as many places as possible, then we need to agendize our meeting slightly differently to make that happen. And if we were to hold an off-site meeting, I think we probably need to attack the agenda slightly differently than the way we've been doing it. We probably need to talk about the history a little bit, talk about what we have done, where we're going, because we have held meetings here in Sacramento for the last couple of years, and a lot of people are very familiar with our process. When we go to a new site, we're going to encounter a lot of people that are seeing us for the first time. So we may need to make some assignment in terms of who's going to do these introductions. And then again, item 11, 12, and 13 to be delayed until at the earliest next week. So any other additional items that any of the commissioners want to include? I think I took a few notes between the time I generated this list.
I have one item. When we're discussing calendaring, is there a more efficient way that we can keep our availability updated?
I would suggest that we create a group calendar, and then everyone can update.
Let's include that as part of discussion on item number 9. Also, there's interest in getting a better idea on the funding availability for this commission. So I'm hoping that sometime today, Friday, we'll initiate that discussion so that we can gain a better understanding as to how much money is left, so that we can tailor our plans, our activities accordingly. Also, another item is it may be appropriate for us to try to set up multiple, I don't have a name for it, but let me just create one, call-in sites where somebody can perhaps address the commission from a remote site. If we do want to set that up, we need to notice it and include that as part of our agenda.
And also the remote sites for commissioners to participate from remote sites.
Right. Remote sites not only for participants, public to call in addressing the commission, but also for commissions to use in the event he or she can make it to the meeting. Okay.
I wonder for item 10 if we can request that that our executive director actually put a plan together for the training. There's a number of required trainings that we have to have, and we probably want to get those out of the way.
Chairperson, yeah, on number 9, I'm wondering if we can, as we have that discussion, have some detailed budget information regarding the costs of transcripts, of videoing, of the web conferencing, all the different alternatives we want to consider?
Yes, we'll go into that in more detail as we go to that item. One last item I forgot to include in my list is guidelines for this commission to give to our executive director. Case in point is how much discretionary power does he have in terms of signing checks and issuing contracts and on and on. So that discussion will take place over the next tomorrow. All right, I think we can always add more items to the agenda as we go along, but this is just so that you get a feel as to what are all the things we're trying to accomplish. Go ahead.
Commissioner Young, on item number 8, can we have some, can we review preliminary census data that might be available to us at this moment with regard to the state of California? I know that the actual data won't be in until April, but I think that there's some preliminary data that might be available to us to at least be familiar with.
The question I have is, the agenda I cover is mainly for the next couple days.
Okay. All right.
I think maybe toward the end of Friday, we can talk about what we want to do next week. If you want to squeeze that into the next couple days, I'll be happy to do it, but if you think it should wait until next week, we'll wait until next week. All right, thank you. Any additional thoughts? All right, so any particular order that you like to discuss all the things that that we have included in our agenda for the next couple of days?
One other item is, when are we going to go into closed session to discuss candidates for the chief counsel?
I'll ask Mr. Claypool to make a recommendation, and that when would be the appropriate time to go into closed session today in discussion of personnel matters.
So this would be the personnel matters for?
This mainly has to do with the hiring of the interviewing and making a hiring decision associated with the legal chief counsel. I think the decision we probably need to make is down select from the current pool of applicants to a smaller number so that we can schedule them in for interviews.
Certainly. I would ask, is this something that we want to do today or tomorrow? The only reason I haven't had a chance to tally and to see whether I've received everyone's list, so.
Would you be able to accomplish that by this afternoon?
Certainly.
Okay, so we'll schedule that for this
Okay.
afternoon, and because I think the sooner we
Get them
notice
scheduled.
the candidates, the better off we'll be. Thank you very much. All right, if there's no suggestions for the order of attacking all these agenda items, I'll just go down numerically, starting with item number 3, then, the commission governance. Anybody want to propose a topic within that category?
I'd like to start with the process about selecting Commissioner Kuo's replacement, because I think that's pretty high priority.
And I'd suggest we frame it, hopefully we are all in for the long haul, but it's really the process, if there ever is any commissioner who needs to be replaced, what process do we approach that by?
Correct.
So I just wanted to point out that the first day it went through, you know, a process that I think worked quite well. So I just want to put that on the table as kind of trying to do this, you know, by setting candidates that kind of were in the top for a lot of people into a pool, and then cutting that down, taking a look at how that affects all of the factors, the diversity factors that we're required to consider, and hopefully coming to consensus as a group.
Having not been a part of those discussions, could you guys give us more of a framework of how you accomplished your task of selecting the 6?
Sure. So to go in a little more detail, all of us individually reviewed the extensive amount of information that was available on all the candidates. And that included the initial and supplementary applications, the interview, which of course was available both in video and transcript form, letters of recommendation, the public comments on each candidate. Then, we individually came up with our thoughts on the top candidates, and then when we met as a group, we asked to move certain candidates into a pool for consideration. Now, we had a bit of a harder task in that we had to build a full slate. This time, I think we have to look at the whole commission as a slate, and how would the new commissioner add to the diversity of our commission. We did have some principles, which I have notes here, but please, other folks who are in that process can remind us of some of the principles that we talked about as a group, philosophies similar to what we're going to do for the outreach framework, where one of them I know was certainly that we wanted to err on the side of adding diversity whenever we could, and certainly on the required factors, but there are also many other factors of diversity that are not mandated. So I know many of us took other factors into consideration as well. And then we wanted to again, look at the balance on the whole commission to make sure we were meeting the mandated factors. One thing that we did, which shouldn't be necessary this time since we're only replacing one candidate, was to look at anchor candidates in each subpool, Republican, Democrat, and decline to state. And of course, right now we're only going to be looking at the Democratic subpool. So that's probably not necessary this time.
We also, in addition to the required factors, we did take into consideration, to the extent possible, and this is, I think, comes to somewhat from viewing the videotapes, and I'm not sure whether we're going to have those available to everyone again, especially the new six, because they didn't get to see them at all. But I think, especially because we're bringing somebody in now and asking them to jump into the pool, into the deep end, we really need to consider, somebody who's going to be able to step in and fill any gaps we may think we have in skills or whatever. We're somewhat constricted, has to be a Democrat. But in other respects, I think we can look at someone who will be an easy fit both for them and for the rest of the commission.
So I found my notes. So for each of the required factors, philosophically we said for geography, we wanted to consider that very broadly because we are trying to represent the whole state with an understanding that, just because you hail from a particular location doesn't mean that's the only location you're representing. But a lot of people have traveled for their jobs. They've lived in multiple places in California. They have family in certain places. So we looked at geography very broadly. On the racial and ethnic diversity, we erred on the side of having more diversity and seeking additional voices if we could. I think all of us agreed that the gender split didn't matter. As it turned out, we happened to split 7-7 after we were done with the slate, but that wasn't something I don't think any of us considered heavily. And then to do our best on economic status to the degree possible. And again, I think we did a pretty reasonable job of that, looking at the whole commission. And as Commissioner Raya talked about, skill sets were also important to us, and that includes people skills, includes ability to get along with the current commission.
Another factor that I remember from my notes that we considered, we were somewhat constrained in the pool in our ability to do this, but was around age of the applicants. I know we agreed as a commission that we thought that having a diverse mix of ages on the commission would actually impact our outreach strategies. So given we only have 6-7 folks to choose from, that might be constrained. But.
As we proceed, keep in mind the differences between what the first 8 commissioner went through and the task that we're about to embark on is the fact that we had the luxury of having a whole month in doing a single task, which is to pick the commissioners. As we move forward, our time is limited, and we're basically going to have a big demand, not only enjoying the maps, but having to make this decision on an unplanned basis. So the process that we define for ourselves should take that into serious consideration.
So am I correct in understanding then, just in my brief notes, it's the process we're talking about is similar to what we've been using to hire staff so far. We've individually reviewing all the application material available, and then individually then coming up with a individual ranking of top candidates, and then as a group discussing those rankings and coming to consensus. And that would be the same kind of framework we'd look at.
Yeah, the major differences between what we do in selecting staff and what we do in selecting commissioner is that the commissioner process is all in an open meeting, where staff is the interview, the discussion, all those were in closed sessions.
And do we have an estimate as to when we'll get the material? I'm assuming it's from BSA about the applicants, other than, as I see all that's online are the videos.
Mr. Claypool?
Yes, the Secretary of State's office right now is working on uploading that information and putting together the packages for you. So I would anticipate it should be done today. We do have one individual on the list who has asked to speak with me first, and I can't tell you why, but has asked to speak with me, and so we're in the process of
let's
trying to
discuss
facilitate
the
that.
process, and let's
Okay.
stay away from the candidate
So I have
discussion at this point.
Yeah, I have a question, I guess, for our attorney and for all of us, which is, given that the initial rules required 8 random selections and 6 that were selected by the randomly selected 8, and this person is one of the randomly selected persons, whether we would be in error if we did a selection rather than we will then have 7 selected and 7 random, which just technically is different than what the regulations set out. So I don't know, this is all, we're sort of, figuring this out as we go along. And I don't particularly have a view one way or another, but I think it's something we need to discuss and perhaps even think about whether it opens up any problems vis-a-vis the regulations.
Yeah, I haven't, that's a great question, and I haven't got a ready answer. Other than to say, I think you have a good deal of freedom the way you choose. But the point about the regs is something that I wrote down to myself about a week ago and immediately forgot. And I will take a look at that and get back to you specifically. As I was thinking about it this morning, I think you can choose from that pool and be safe. But that's not a complete answer to your question, and I'll get it for you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, given that that I also was not a part of the selection process, however, given the I think the quality of the selectees, I think it's a most excellent process. Right? So, but the other my question is that we're not sure whether the remaining 6 are actually available and willing to serve, so that I'm not sure if we've outreached to them already to see, to inquire about their willingness. But
I believe staff is currently inquiring about their continued interest in being a commissioner at this point.
because it's, if not, I was going to suggest that perhaps we could select one and maybe an alternate just in case that person was not available, the first person back. If that's been taken care of, then that's great.
So I think Commissioner Blanco brought up an excellent point. But the only thing I was able to find in our handy-dandy, legal handbook was that we have to fill the vacancy within 30 days, with a preference from pulling from the original pool. So I would agree with Cy that we probably have some latitude to choose how we
Excuse
actually do that.
Commissioner Dye, are you looking at 60863? Section 60863?
Looking at section 8252.5.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at, in the legal handbook, it's on page 46. If a vacancy occurs before we complete our redistricting, and, excuse me, and we are unable to fill the vacancy with an applicant from the same subpool that Elaine was drawn from as it existed on November 20th. Now, is that the pool on November 20th? Was that before the legislature exercised their strikes?
No, it was
No,
after.
that was after, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the reg that I don't have in front of me, but I want to take a look at. So let me do that. And
What was the number of the rate? It's 60863, and it's on page 46 of the legal handbook we were given, if you have that material.
We don't have a hard copy. Maybe, I think the six have that electronic, but it sure would be nice to have a, excuse me, I don't know if that's something, the legal handbook. I think we have, the new six have it electronically, but it would be nice to have a hard copy.
Oh, I
Since we can't get
apologize.
online.
I thought that had been taken care of. I thought everybody had the hard copy, and if you don't, we'll get it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
and-
apologies. I just made that assumption and left mine sitting on my desk this morning.
Yeah, it appears that the act only talks about the creation of the pool. It doesn't actually talk about the selection process. So I would imagine if it doesn't specify that we have latitude. And just from a personal standpoint, I think that, given that there are 13 out of 14 of us, and, I think, our ability to work together as a group is important. I personally would prefer that we actually go through a selection process rather than selecting someone randomly, but I don't know how other people feel.
No, I agree with Commissioner Dye. I think it's a great perspective to look at it from the standpoint of, when you look at the purposes for both of those selection processes. The random draw, obviously, was the most transparent and fair way to begin the commission. But once you have the luxury of having a random, diverse group, obviously it's in the interest of the commission and the public to be able to choose the most qualified candidate to represent California. And again, the spirit of the act seems to support the idea of giving the commission the latitude to review candidates and help identify the best suited candidate to add to the commission and representing all of California.
Mr. Gary? Do you want to speak? No, okay. Connie?
Again, thinking ahead to the future months, I'm wondering, would it be appropriate and possible to add a standing agenda item that was considering any commission vacancies, so that I know we had a 2-week lag time before we could really deal with the replacement of Commissioner Kuo?
Live and learn. We'll do that from this point on.
Okay.
All right. Does everybody have a reasonably good idea as to what the process is going to be?
Should we make a motion?
I don't know whether we necessarily need a motion to do so. If you feel you want one, by all means, proceed.
Good without. I'm good with consensus.
Okay.
One other suggestion I have for our new executive director, all of the first 8 commissioners received some training on how to do a completely public selection process because personnel matters generally are not handled in public. So I would just recommend that our final 6 commissioners get the final 5. 6, we're 6. 6 commissioners get the same training because I thought that was valuable.
I would agree.
Commissioner Dye, the training exists on the video, I believe. It does not?
No,
All right.
that was one-on-one with council.
All right, thank you. Okay,
And I guess I would say on that, in order to not slow down, I mean, you know, in order not to burden the rest of the members who've gone through that training, I'd be willing to carve out a separate time or whatever, so that we don't have to make everybody go through that. I don't know how we do that, given notice requirements and all of that, but.
Sorry?
This was done, just a conversation with council.
Okay, so, yeah.
Si?
Yeah, you could, I mean, one way to handle it is the way we handle the Bagley Keaton training for the second 6.
This training was done one-on-one. It was just a phone call.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if we can handle it that way as well, either way, I mean, we can do it either way.
All right, let's do it similar to what was done for the first 8. with
So you
the-
each received, if I understand.
A briefing, yes.
From staff.
council. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, watching the tapes as I did, and most of us, I'm sure, did, the 6th of us. We didn't have an opportunity to ask questions and interact with that, so I think this would be important.
All right, so the 6 newer commissioners will receive a phone call. Thank you.
Sounds so ominous.
Yeah, really.
Next up, item under agenda, item number 3.
We talk about committees and membership.
Sure.
Know that, that we established, I think it was 3, 4 committees, 5 committees. Okay. The last time, and there was some in a list, I believe, that was generated of interest in each of the particular committees. As I recall, most of the committees had about 2 to 4 interested individuals in that, except for the outreach, and there was overwhelming interest in participating in that one. There was a suggestion perhaps of maybe dividing that up into 2 subcommittees. So anyway, I was wondering whether we had that list available to us as something we could speak from.
I have the committees and the people that volunteered. Do you want to start with a particular one? Because I've been thinking too, especially outreach, because we have 7 people, which I think is unmanageable for actually doing the planning and making the recommendations. But the people who volunteered for outreach were Filkins, Weber, Forbes, Ontai, excuse me, myself, Aguirre, Dye, and Ward.
So my suggestion, Commissioner Aguirre, is that we actually defer discussion of the outreach committee until we've had a chance to discuss our framework and philosophy, because then it may be clearer how the committee should be structured after that.
Do you want me to read the other committees that were? Finance was Ontai and Yao. Technical, Baraba, Parvenu, Aguirre, Yao, and DeJulio. Legal, Filkins, Weber, myself, and Forbes, and we assumed that Maria Blanco would step in there and I would step out.
Was that in?
You are too?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. And Commissioner Ward is telling me that he should also be on legal, so I'm going to add his name.
And I should be on finance also.
Okay.
Right, and I'm on finance also.
Okay. Let me do that.
Apparently we didn't speak up loud enough.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if we can just kind of redo this with staff to collect the names so we have an official record, because I think we all have a different list of names. But in any case, one of my suggestions when we establish this is that we not feel like we're, strictly beholden to speaking now or forever holding your peace. And if you're interested and you want to participate, I think that's great. I do think there's a practical matter of, keeping the numbers to a manageable number. So I think we agreed 3 to probably 6 maximum. Otherwise it becomes too hard to actually have good conversation.
I think we also talked about having at least one representative from each of the 3 subpools as well, too.
Logistically, us meeting is going to be interesting. How we can tie this into our schedule with our ongoing meetings. So we have to think about that. I don't know whether it's more practical for the subcommittees to meet prior to our general gathering.
Right. My suggestion is that we had talked last time about meeting Wednesday through Sunday if necessary, and that our subcommittee meetings happen on Wednesday, maybe part of Thursday if necessary. Then the full commission will meet immediately afterwards to take action, since no subcommittee is allowed to actually take action, only to make recommendations.
And we're looking at doing this next week, possibly.
We can't do it next week. We can't do it sooner than
February, I believe, is probably
It's
the
not on the
earliest
agenda
practical
for
time
us.
that we can take any action on it.
I know we're all eager.
Did we go over the list of names for the public information subcommittee?
No, that's Baraba, Aguirre, Forbes, Parvenu, myself, and Ward.
I actually volunteer for that too, but again, I think we need to
Yeah.
we need to look at, probably everyone should not volunteer for more than 1 or 2 because there'll be issues of us being able to meet concurrently then.
Refresh my memory, did we determine if the subcommittee meetings needed to be beyond transcripts or minutes? Is there anything?
I think we
that needs to
can
be
decide
done?
that now.
Okay, yeah. Since the subcommittees don't have any authority to make decisions or bind the commission in any way, and are simply an advisory body to the commission, I would think that we could do that in closed session.
No, it's not a closed session matter. It has to be open, number one. Number two is if the subcommittee is to recommend to the full committee, it seems like you would want public inputs during those meetings. Because by the time you make the recommendation, it seems like the decision is strongly favored in one direction. And so some kind of public input process should be included in the subcommittee meeting. Early on, I brought out the possibility of maybe just having an audio outreach as compared to having both an audio and video. And if we consider video to be important, having live video is very expensive and very cumbersome. So we may want to consider maybe some kind of delay audio where the meeting can be captured on video camera and then posted onto the website at a later date, maybe within 48 hours type of a time frame. But the audio would be live, so if somebody listening in on it and they can come to your meeting, they can maybe call in. And also the subcommittee meeting, we may want to consider doing it via some kind of video conferencing as compared to be traveling to one site. And again, we need to find a way so that public can participate in those conference calls. These are all ideas. I'm not sure how practical they are, but these are considerations that we need to take into, and perhaps decisions made in terms of how we to proceed forward.
Can I, may I have,
response?
May I just suggest, because I don't want to get too far off, I know we may have a discussion about technical issues, but I think it's worth mentioning, going back to Commissioner Galambos-Malloy's suggestion about maybe, because it is tied in with what we do with these subcommittees, is maybe we could get at least some estimate of what it would cost to do each one of these different types of, whether it be video, a live stream, both the cost and the technical requirements. That way we'll have a set idea when we go any place. We could say, this is what we're looking for. Do you have this ability? But the cost for a live stream, a cost for recording, a cost for transcript. So that way we have some idea of what, if we have to make choices, we'll have some idea of what our cost benefit is of those choices.
To stay focused on my concept of understanding subcommittee structure and process, I'm a little unclear then as to if what we just laid out is of how the subcommittees will function in a public forum, taking public input, being recorded, all this kind of procedure, the same thing that we're doing as a full body. Is it really that much more efficient than just having an agenda item on communications and then taking that? It seems to me like we're burdening ourselves logistically and staff and time and everything else then to form a bunch of subcommittees if we're going to follow the same process we're doing as a full committee. Maybe we could just take these as agenda line items and address them quicker. Just a thought.
Just not having been here, so I apologize. Is there a document that I can look at that explains the reasoning behind the subcommittees? For example, what would the finance subcommittee do that can't be done on the full commission? And I just, if you can just direct me at something, I don't want to take up time here. Because I do share this concern about whether we're adding functions unnecessarily, but we may have really thought about it.
My understanding of the subcommittee purpose was to expedite a lot of these processes. Each of the areas that we identified for subcommittees are areas in which there needs to be some dedicated focus and kind of some groundwork laid and things like that. So being able to break into subcommittees with a representative group from the commission and just be able to simply lay out ideas for how we can go about possibly handling the focus of that subcommittee and meeting those goals. So for example, outreach or finance. What are our finances? How much do things cost? What's the most efficient way to do this? And then come back together as a group and actually say, hey, this is what we talked about, this is what we identified, what do you think? And so that was my trying to get a better understanding as to whether or not we needed to really follow, ensure the same processes that we have as a full commission. Because again, if we're able to streamline that and sit down and just put our heads together and come up with some ideas, kind of a working group, and then come back together as a full commission and actually discuss it and explore it and maybe put some more of a direction to it, an agreement, then we can go ahead and open it to the public and take the comments and do all that. That seems to me to be efficient.
Yeah.
But if we're going to go ahead and follow the same process, yeah, I would question as to whether or not we're accomplishing.
My impression was that, as you articulated it quite well, and because we have to move fast, and if by the time we got to get everything on a 14-day calendar, and we just never be able to get things done. So this was an opportunity to speed things along. We all went through a very detailed process of revealing our interests, so we should be able to talk to each other on some of these items, not to make decisions, but to look at alternatives to bring those forward in a public meeting.
Let me ask our counsel to address this. He has a few words.
Again, I'm not advocating this at all. I just want everybody to keep in mind that when you have 3 or more, you become a public body. If you have 2, you're not a public body, and you're not subject to bag of cane. You don't have to have an open meeting. You don't have to have notice. You can piggyback on the notice of the full, and I just thought I would remind you of that at this point. I'm not suggesting that's a better idea. First of all, it's not my suggestion, and it's past my brief, but just to keep that in mind. I'm just addressing the notion around flexibility in dealing with Bagley Keene.
I think that's a good point that Commissioner Ward makes, though. I've been thinking about that also. That's the problem right there. If we have to have open meetings in all the subcommittees, if we had 3 or more, that becomes a logistics problem. And I didn't think that through until last couple of days on how we would handle that. That actually may slow us down rather than expedite the process.
So I think those are good points. I still believe that a smaller group can have a faster discussion, and people with the interest in particular topics will be able to do more legwork that wouldn't require all 14 of us to do. I mean, we've already experienced this in our hiring decisions, and which was completely appropriate for executive director, but you know, we've already talked about, do we all really want to go through all the redacted applications for the admin assistant? Is that efficient? I suspect not. I don't think that the burden's any greater, except we'll need multiple rooms. You know, the agendas for the committees can be a lot more specific, and a smaller number of people can think about the agendas, you know, for those groups. And if we can meet concurrently, we will be able to get many more meetings done. And then the full commission can consider the options, knowing that, you know, a smaller group has really done the homework and has ready to present the pros and cons, rather than all of us having to do that work for everything.
And I think that we can deal with some of the issues regarding it being more cumbersome by having a standing notice of the subcommittee meetings. And that would avoid, I think, a lot of the delay that could otherwise occur.
May I also suggest, too, that at least initially, we could have the committee with all those individuals who had presented an interest, but maybe as we get some of these issues, I'm thinking some of the technical, the finance ones set up, or at least the system, maybe we could suggest having 2 people as a point that they could quickly address issues in the future, and then bring them to the full commission once the initial groundwork has been laid.
That might work.
It's just a suggestion.
That might work.
In an attempt to, again, try to find a nexus between the subcommittee efficiency and yet public meeting requirements, what about broadening or further defining, specifying subcommittees? For example, outreach, having a subcommittee outreach, community outreach, and then legislator outreach or something like that, and narrowing these subcommittees down to a group of 2 that can function much like the chair and vice chair, that can call each other and actually hammer out, talk about what items should we be looking at, can you look this up, you run this down by next week, that kind of situation, and then come together and we can, on the agenda, just go down, legal subcommittee of Bagley Keene legal, subcommittee, whatever the case may be, and those 2 people will have been able to communicate, come up with agenda items, specific agenda items, have groundwork laid, have done research, and present those to the full commission, therefore avoiding the need to have a individual subcommittee meeting, but like I said, having 2 people able to do work all week.
I would be concerned that a group of 2 is too small, especially if that would, I think, violate the spirit of the act, which is very clear about having 3 subpools. And also the idea of having full transparency, and if a lot of the important discussions and brainstorming, are happening in the subcommittee, as Commissioner Yao pointed out, that's also where the public comment needs to come in as well. Bagley Keene does not prevent, one commissioner from calling another commissioner, which just prevents us from having a serial meeting and a quorum. So, I just want to clarify that, because I think we're interpreting that too strictly.
I think 4 out of 5 subcommittees that we have created are dealing with mainly organizational type or startup organization type of issues at this point in time. I don't think we're trying to do the drawing of the map, so to speak, in a subcommittee. So think of it in that light. I think all of us want to get through this stage as quickly as possible so that we can get down to the business that we're asked to do. The faculty keen requirement is absolute. I think any way that we try to shortchange that is really not appropriate. So giving public access, I think the only decision I think we're tasked to make is, make a decision so that we comply with the budget and time and availability, commissioner time availability, taking those into serious consideration and make the best decision associated with it. But in terms of making it open to the public, I agree with Commissioner Dyewood. It's 2 people or 3 people or 6 people. I think we need to honor that to the best that we can. So having said that, do we have a preference for doing away with the subcommittee, or do we want to continue to proceed addressing the subcommittee as a way to divide and conquer all the issues that are before us at this point in time?
I'd just like to make a quick, I just want to make it clear, in no way was I suggesting that we shortchange the public with Bagley Keene or somehow try to work around it. Just the idea is that the public input is obviously very important and is a primary focus. The public also wants us to get things done. The public wants to see results, and I know has put a lot of trust in us to accomplish that. So we're just trying to explore ideas on how to, like you said, quickly get set up and quickly be able to do the business of the people.
Let me go back to Commissioner Blanco's comment. Each of the 5 subcommittees would be tasked with looking at the scope or some direction or strategy, and then come back and make a recommendation to the full board.
Yeah, and look at options so that the full commission understands what options you consider, the pros and cons, because 14 people might have a different idea than 3 to 5, whatever the number is. But the point is that the smaller group has done the homework, and this will not require all of us to do the same homework if you can give us an executive summary of it.
And I think part of the thinking behind the subcommittee structure is also that we were each brought on the commission based on various skill sets and sets of expertise. And granted, this also represents an opportunity for many of us to build other areas of expertise, but provides a place for those of us who bring something to the table to really be able to take it and run with it in a more expedient way than, myself, who's not a legal expert, for example. I'd be happy to defer some of that initial thinking to the legal experts.
Could I suggest that maybe as we have this discussion that we look at it as 4 subcommittees that are dealing with kind of the initial, as Chairman Yao was saying, the initial startup, so to speak, of these issues. But really it's the outreach committee that has a lot of these other issues we're kind of talking about. So, and I think that will come out as we discuss the redistricting issues and our approach to outreach in general. So maybe for now we could look at kind of the 4 other subcommittees. Do we agree with continuing with those at least, and then working out the details for the outreach?
Without going to taking a vote, can I get some feedback from the rest of the commissioners to whether we want to address the 4 subcommittees, and without including the outreach subcommittee in the discussion that we're holding right now? Okay, I think we have a general consensus. So let's.
Yeah, my only thought is that I think the idea of the subcommittees is pretty well accepted. The process that we were talking about might be that we should. What's hanging up, I think, is how we're going to do it, and how do we meet the law requirements. Perhaps we should just agree on having subcommittees, and direct our executive director to figure out a method by which we could do it without meeting the intent of the act.
I think the timeline that we're facing right now is, if anything that we do, if we intend to make this subcommittee go into effect, let's say in the month of February, we need to post the agenda by the 25th of January. And so that being the case, today, tomorrow, probably the only opportunity that we have in making these type of decisions, which would include, as I mentioned earlier, as to whether we're going to have audio or audio plus video and all those detailed decisions associated with it. So let's go ahead and continue discussing the 4 subcommittee and try to reach concurrence as to how we proceed.
I think that the legal committee is going to be sort of in the same position as the outreach committee, that it's going to be one of those that things are throughout the entire process, things are going to be coming up, just like with outreach, that it's not just the startup phase of, how we're going to do our public information, how we're going to set up technical stuff, or what our budget is. I don't know, but I suspect it may end up being more like the outreach committee, that it's ongoing. So I don't know if we can really separate outreach and discuss the other 4. Maybe the other folks on the legal committee have a different opinion.
So,
Cynthia?
Yeah, I was going to say that when I proposed these, I proposed them kind of as standing committees with the idea that we would have ad hoc committees for other special circumstances, because I think all of these are going to be ongoing. I can't imagine that, we wouldn't think about the information we want to provide to the public for different meetings. I can't imagine that we wouldn't have financial and contractual issues to deal with throughout the life of the commission. I cannot imagine that we're not going to have legal issues that we want some of our legal experts, to think about. So I disagree that they're just startups. I think that what we need to focus on is what is the agenda for February 9th for each of these committees, so that we can get the proper public notice out, and then we can have those discussions in smaller groups.
Okay, duly noted. I'll retract my assessment of a startup and organization issues, but instead looking at it on a permanent basis.
I liked Commissioner Forbes' suggestion that we just keep this as a standing noticed item. I think we just have to jump in. Okay, we've never done any of this before, so we're, just trying to find the best thing. We could sit here all day trying to figure out the perfect solution to this subcommittee issue, and I don't think that's going to help us either. I think we just need to jump in. I think, honestly, that people need to think, where am I going to be of most use to the commission? Because looking at my list, there are people who want to be on 3 or 4 subcommittees. That's not going to work. So, we need to be honest with ourselves. What can I do that's most helpful? And then you need to say, okay, I will pick 2, and that's it. That will kind of spread it out. It'll make it smaller. We can expand. I think Commissioner Ward had some good suggestions about, kind of subcommittees, whatever we're going to call them. But, breaking it out a little bit, that'll make the group smaller. And let's just jump in and try it. See if, that small, efficient group can come up with ideas that the rest of us can just make decisions on and move forward.
I think I heard a motion of limiting the membership to any commissioners to serving on no more than 2 subcommittees. Would you like to make that a motion?
Okay, so moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any further discussion on that? If not, let's go ahead and take a voice,
Can I have
Go
one
ahead.
comment about that. I think, so around process, around how we, for example, if there will be a commissioner that will be joining us later on. I know that many people here have already, other than Commissioner Blanco and myself, have already kind of put their stake in the ground on which of the committees that they're interested in. And so how we proceed with implementing that, I think, is important to have some ranking. And then, for example, if we bring in that final commissioner, what level of flexibility do they or any future commissioners have as to where they seat themselves?
I think Commissioner Dye suggests that we probably shouldn't exceed the maximum number of 6. Am I quoting you correctly? And I kind of interpret from our last meeting that we accepted that as a good guideline. And Commissioner Reyes suggests that perhaps volunteer for more than 2 would be counterproductive. And I want to see whether we agree with that as another one of these firm guidelines that we should adhere to. That doesn't mean that we're trying to restrict or do anything else other than making this not a startup process, but making this process go as quickly and as smoothly as we possibly can at this point in time.
I think what we may be hung up is exactly what do the subcommittees do. We narrowed it down to 2 or 3. I would see that each committee would be presenting a template of ideas to the board. They're not something that's going to be adopted. It's an idea setting that needs to be explored by the full board. So it's a template of ideas, and that might help those that want to be on multiple committees to realize that they are going to participate.
So maybe I can suggest a process. I don't think we should, be beholden to whatever we volunteered last time. Maybe every commissioner can put their top 3 choices in rank order. And thinking about, again, what your skill set is, how you can really contribute and balance that with what you're interested in. And then we can have staff kind of sort that out for us so we get reasonable numbers.
I agree, great suggestion.
And make sure we have one of each on, that we meet our minimum, construct as well.
Not having seen, the transcripts were not available at the time I came here, so can you just clarify for me the public information and the technical subcommittees, what the scopes of each of those committees are? I'm assuming technical is dealing with the data, overseeing the consultants, identifying the
Mr.
software.
Baraba, I think you were one of the,
Let's see what I wrote.
oh, Michelle?
Yeah, we just, I think
All right.
everyone just wrote a quick little bit, but let's see, in terms of technical. But I had them here. Basically, you're on the right track. It was basically looking at the subcontractors for any type of software, the technical needs for the actual meetings themselves. Yeah, all the consultants, things along those lines.
Okay.
And what was the other subcommittee?
The public information.
The purpose of that subcommittee was to make sure that we have consistent messages that go out after, excuse me, each meeting.
I think it's more.
And go ahead.
I was going to say it's on the output from the commission, as opposed to outreach, which is kind of how we receive information. I think the public information is what we say to the public to educate them.
Do any of these subcommittees, will any of them, I know finance is here, be involved with the budget and handling budgetary matters? We should consider that as well.
Yeah, that's
it's information. It's going to cost getting information out at some point, marketing, advertising, that kind of, I don't know. Whatever that outreach entails, I think we need to consider that.
So I think the thought was that the Finance and Administration Committee, would look at, budgets and projections and all that, which I'm sure would be performed by staff, but it's again to provide oversight.
Okay. We're clear on that.
We currently do have a motion and it's been seconded. Would you like to withdraw that motion or would you like to proceed and?
I have no big stake in my motion. If we want to proceed by consensus, that's fine.
Withdraw the motion?
I will withdraw my motion.
All right, thank you. All right, so let me summarize what we have decided. Each of us is to submit our preferences to our executive director, and hopefully by sometime tomorrow, we'll have a roster. And let me take the liberty of suggesting that let's restate our charter on each of the subcommittee, and along with the preferred meeting time. You think we can get to that point, having each of the subcommittee members working with staff so that we can bring it back to the overall committee for final approval, if that's what needs to happen?
I wonder if we can do, I wonder if that's not possible to do meeting time. I wonder if we can just agree as a guiding principle that we'll meet on Wednesdays, and, you know, the first half of Thursday is necessary, that we'll try to have concurrent meetings so we can.
Well, as I mentioned, I think we need to agendize it by the 25th. So making sure that they do not overlap, making sure that the meeting time is appropriate probably is something that we need to decide on as soon as possible.
So just to recap, I want to make sure I know what we're kind of finalizing with this. Are we saying that what we'll do is agree to have the 5 subcommittees on the agenda for February 9th?
4, I think, is what we're talking about at this point, unless we
Okay.
include the outreach back into the discussion.
Okay. And then at that point, we will allow the subcommittees to work on the details of hashing out what they're going to do specifically. I think it goes back to Commissioner Dye's earlier question of what do we want to put on the agenda related to these subcommittees. I think some of the logistics staff can work out for us in terms of who's interested and maybe some times and things. But I guess I'm going back to what have we decided in terms of putting these subcommittees on the February 9th agenda.
All right, let me ask Mr. Claypool, is this understood and reasonable to accomplish in the next day or two?
For the subcommittees? I think so. I think we can get it done.
Another
right.
point of clarification, as I heard what Commissioner Dye was suggesting, it was also that we go ahead and mark, say, every Wednesday that we are, of the weeks that we're scheduled to be in session would be a standing subcommittee meeting
Correct.
time.
Okay.
Wednesday, and did you want Thursday as well, or just Wednesday? Wednesday and Thursday? And something to keep in mind, you can piggyback off the notice for the commission. So if the subcommittee is going to meet on a topic that is within the ambit of a commission topic, that's sufficient notice.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we just add a standing item to the agenda, that is committee report out, so all the committees are listed, so someone from each of the subcommittees can report so that we can take action on those items.
So I don't want to make any assumptions here. So my understanding as we have it up to this point is that we meet as a full body at 9:30 on Wednesdays, but our subcommittees will meet prior to 9:30? No?
No, that we'll meet as subcommittees
When?
on Wednesdays.
On Wednesdays?
So that we can take action on Thursdays and Fridays as a full body.
Oh, okay. So the full day Wednesday will be a subcommittee meeting, one or the other, whatever.
Probably all subcommittees, I would
All
imagine.
subcommittees on
Every
Wednesday.
subcommittee that has agendized items to discuss, so I think we really need to get down to brass tacks, and,
Okay.
you know, whoever's volunteering for which subcommittee,
Right.
start thinking about agenda items that
Okay.
should be, you know,
So-
agendized.
So specifically, if I'm on the outreach committee, and I'm also on the technical committee, because I can't be at both places, like we're all going to face a scenario at the same time, we're going to have to specifically lay out how these subcommittees are scheduled for that Wednesday. So,
I'm certain that Dan can sort that out for us.
I'm curious as to, the chair mentioned that we took out outreach from this discussion. I'm just wondering, since we're just talking about structure and not details of membership and things, should that not be included in this?
We'll discuss that next, the outreach.
What I'm saying is, as a subcommittee, we're actually excluding it from this structure discussion?
No, we're just suggesting that we have the discussion about our philosophy first, so that it becomes clear, how we want to structure outreach.
Sure, so all the subcommittees will work the same, outreach isn't going to be, right, okay. I'm just unclear, thank you.
It's just that we might have, we might have 5 outreach committees that are each
Sure.
handling a different aspect, so I don't think we know that yet.
I think we still have to make a decision as to, in terms of the outreach, audio only, video, any preferences by any of the commissioner or by staff? I can tell you in the process trying to work the video for the February meeting at an off-site location, that ended up being one of the most challenging issues.
My
to address.
take on it, this may come up in our next discussion, is that, as you'll hear, my preference is to have a lot of outreach meetings. And so I would be inclined to have a less technical demanding requirement, because that will facilitate our being able to go to more places.
Have we asked our technical people yet what is necessary? Having just looked physically at what they're doing back there, it's kind of overwhelming. So I'm not sure what the logistical requirements are for an off-site location to duplicate what they're doing. Do we even know what's needed? In terms of live streaming versus just an audio versus, I'm assuming because the audio will still have to go through the web somehow versus just videotaping and putting up later.
Dan, let me ask you, when you were with BSA and filming all these events, do you have any sense of the cost?
I remember working on the contracts for it, but I don't know what the actual final costs were. They, for all of the filming, it will appear pricey, but it was actually for the length of time that we did it and for the number of time, for the number of people that were interviewed, so forth. It really wouldn't be, it's not cost prohibitive to the budget that we have. But having said that, it does become kind of a logistical issue when we start looking, particularly when we start looking at subcommittees meeting and whether or not you want to have it at that level. And then if we start moving out to different locations, it becomes a logistical issue. It is on the list of the things that you've asked me to take a look at, is to take a look at what the cost would be. That's about as far as I think I should go at this point. I can make a phone call and ask what the final budget was when we get a break. It would give you some more information. It's the best I can do.
Let me just take a minute and share with you the concerns I discovered. Number one is, for every new site, it's a first-time experience. In other words, they do not know how to link up with our particular website, the quality in terms of the procedures. So the new technician or the new manager responsible for that task has to basically perfect that process before starting any meeting. So that's a significant effort. And assuming something doesn't happen the way we plan it, if it doesn't work, who's responsible? Does that mean we hold up the meeting? Does that mean we got to have somebody stand by back at the home base to address those kind of problems? I think the cost associated with it is probably one of the least important issues. It's a matter of equipment and the operator. And if we want to have an experienced operator, that means you got to basically pay for that individual along with hauling all that equipment to all the sites that we're going to be going to, and also setting it up ahead of time. So it's probably the learning process and the risk associated with it that create the biggest concern as compared to the absolute cost itself.
So along that line of thinking, Dan, was that going to be part of your report?
The part of the report of what the costs were?
Yes, and the logistics and the hiring of an IT?
No, not of the one that I had discussed for tomorrow. That wasn't going to be part of it. That was strictly just the individuals I thought that we needed for administrative purposes here. It would take more time to put together the cost of actually going out and serving the logistics of the areas you want to go to. But that was also part of the discussion that we had initially when I did, the first time I discussed it with you or talked to you about this position, was that we needed to have that vision of what the commission wanted to do, how many places it wanted to go, because that would then drive the cost in the plan. So.
Well, it would seem to me we would need an IT person on right away because of all of these challenges that we have in front of us, and February is right around the corner.
I'm concerned that, I know we've talked about going off-site, I'm just concerned that we make a lot of arrangements and have a lot of people go someplace, and as Chairman Yao was saying, if some of the technical issues are still a problem for us, I'm thinking maybe we should suggest waiting to do meetings outside of what we know works right now until maybe we could have, how do they feel about waiting until we have some kind of technical expertise that could do the link with every offsite? They could make the connections and make sure they're arranged before we go offsite. I don't know if we want to do that. I know we've made some initial commitments to Claremont.
I think we'll talk about the offsite at a later item, but I can report back to you at this point in time. I think we solved all those offsite issues for this particular meeting in February. But across the board, as we go to more and more places, and some of them may not be as well equipped as the colleges that I approached, and we would face challenges that may be difficult to overcome. But for the February meeting, I think we have overcome all those issues at this point in time.
I was just, in terms too, I think outreach is something that Commissioner Forbes has mentioned as well too. We want to get out there as soon as we can, to many places as possible. So if we could get someone, whether it's a consultant or an in-house person that can start to really work on that, I think that might be an unnecessary barrier, that if we could have that addressed as soon as possible, that would allow us to do as much outreach as possible.
I wonder if we can just address the basic question in response to Commissioner Forbes' suggestion of trying to minimize the logistics. I mean, a lot of things are solved if you do audio and not video. A lot of things are solved if it doesn't have to be real time. I mean, they have pens now for $20 that can record a conversation, and we can just upload it immediately afterwards. So, I mean, I think we're overcomplicating this. I mean, the technology is not a problem, and the cost is really not a problem unless we are forced to do video live streaming. So if we can just relax that requirement, and we're happy with that, I think that it shouldn't take but a few phone calls to solve this problem.
I agree, Commissioner. I also would like for us to tap into the university and college systems as soon as possible to get in-kind services, because there's a lot of technical expertise on campuses that we can tap into, whether we be in San Diego or Irvine or Berkeley or Chico or wherever, that there's students that would love to do this for us. I think we need to contact the university and state college systems immediately.
I understood Cynthia's comment was that if we could do it, we should do it. If we can't, it's not a requirement. And let's get the meeting started.
Yes. So let's just agree on what we accept as our technical means of communicating with the public, and then that will solve a lot of this too. So it's just a recording, a live.
That I think we should strive for live. I mean, we can strive for video, but I think if we can, I think, an audio recording that is a podcast on the website, I think should be sufficient. I do think transcripts are important, by the way, so there are actually services now that are very inexpensive that will do automatic transcripting.
Just for clarity of conversation, we jumped around a little bit from subcommittee to outreach meetings to offsite commission meetings. What are we talking about, the gamut, or
I believe we're still on the subcommittee meetings, and we have not included the outreach and or any of the other discussion. We touch upon it because of the fact of the cost issue, but and risk issue, but we have not expanded the discussion to include the others.
Then I really do appreciate Vice Chairman Dai's input, as again, understanding the need for the subcommittee to be efficient and a work meeting, again, meeting the minimum requirements. Voice audio seems to be.
So live audio and video whenever possible. Is that the recommendation?
And if not possible, not live audio with a transcript.
Or just tape and delay posting of the video?
On that note, and I'm sorry for the side note here, but Commissioner Ford, do you have one of those pens?
That's Dot.
I am so sorry.
She's not even here.
If that was a motion, I'll second it, so we can
All
move
right.
forward.
Mr. Claypool?
I just have a point of clarification. So we are talking for that Wednesday, this is what this motion is for that Wednesday.
For all subcommittee meetings.
For all subcommittee meetings, we would strive for live.
Mhm.
But it could go all the way to transcripts if that was all that we had.
Yes.
So that's simply for subcommittee, is that the same feeling for the full commission meetings, or?
We're just talking about.
No, we're only talking about the subcommittee meetings at this point in time.
I'm sorry.
All right. So, Cynthia, if I may, would you restate the motion so we know what we're voting on?
Okay, I move that for the purpose of subcommittees, that in the interest of efficiency, that while we will strive for live video recordings, that if it's cost prohibitive or if it's logistically difficult, that at minimum we have a transcript, or try for audio that might be delayed.
One clarification then, when we have the live video or audio available, would you suggest a transcript, or could we do a more condensed version of minutes, given that we'll also have the live option?
Yeah, I will suggest to staff a service that does automatic transcripting.
For all minutes.
Question. I assume meeting minutes is a standard operating procedure. Is that understood to be the case, Mr. Claypool?
No.
If you have a transcript, you're fine. The minutes are required for closed session. We can make it, if you want, to be a requirement, but I think as long as we've got a transcript, then we're covered. And I don't know of any requirement for meeting minutes for open session. There is a requirement for closed session.
I know later on this week, we're going to approve the meeting minutes from a December open session meeting. Is that not a requirement?
We can do them afterwards, yeah. We can certainly do that.
I'm talking about afterward as well, so.
Yeah.
I think he's saying it's not a requirement, though.
Included in your motion, is that that again is strictly an optional item?
Yeah, again, in the interest of efficiency, I would, I would hope that we would consider, not increasing the burden on staff. We have all this detail.
And just another clarification on that at a regular meeting, each one of the committees is going to report out on the business that was just covered. So that in itself will become a part of the record as far as the business of subcommittee.
All right, it's been moved and second. At this point, I'll open up the floor mic to anybody in the public that would be interested in addressing the commission on this particular item. All right, seeing no one coming forward, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any further discussions? If not, let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Aguirre?
Yes.
Commissioner Baraba?
Yes.
Commissioner Blanco?
Yes.
Commissioner Dye?
Yes.
Commissioner DeJulia?
Yes.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber? Commissioner Forbes?
Yes.
Commissioner Galambos Malloy?
Yes.
Commissioner Antai?
Aye.
Commissioner Parvenu?
Yes.
Commissioner Rye?
Yes.
Commissioner Ward?
Yes.
Commissioner Yao?
Yes, I do believe we have the proper vote to pass the motion.
Mr. Chairman, may I request a
Yes.
short recess?
We will, can we make it 5 minutes so that we can be back here promptly? All right, thank you.
Been 3 years since my family's from a small island, and it's, we try and go every 2 years, but this time